right, piss and vinegar day 174. God damn it. So, probably second last session before bicep surgery. I tore my bicep, as we all know. And then I probably won't train for 2 weeks, and then I'll be back, and it'll be more of the same stuff I'm doing, which is like a few sets to failure. So, obviously, this training series is one set to failure, piss and vinegar, Dorian Yates inspired blood and guts type of shit. But I cannot do that right now because the way I'm training is suboptimal. I'm doing slow, controlled movements in order to make sure I don't injure myself any further on my right side, just because I'm paranoid of my right bicep popping and then I'd be totally crippled, but also to train my left side, which we'll say in a second, where I eliminate the elbow by using a band and just doing like slow controlled movements in order to make sure I don't contract my bicep, which will be very important when I get the surgery, because after the surgery I need to absolutely make sure that I'm not contracting the bicep at any time, because it will detach. So yeah, this is just like not total piss and vinegar, albeit I'm still taking sets to failure. It's just slow, monotonous rep speeds, which is something new. The contractions aren't quite what I'm looking for. I like mind muscle connection under heavy weights. I feel that intrinsically makes the most sense. At the end of the day, mechanical tension taken to a set taken to mechanical failure with a decent amount of mechanical tension is all you really need for adaptations. But I don't think it's as optimal as taking a heavy weight and using decently good form with it, rather than this really slow, monotonous stuff. But anyway, it's all good. It's what I have to do. And today's topic, I just wanted to talk about becoming the man that you want to be. And there's so many things I can talk about this, but what's really illuminated this to me recently in so many ways of looking at this was after the instructor, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor who tore my bicep. I was very bitter and angry at this guy, and I still am to an extent. And what I was getting a lot of was people around me, whether it be clients, family, friends, loved ones, etc., saying, you should sue this guy. And I thought about the concept of suing. I never thought that I'd ever do it, and I'm still not going to ever do it. And I'm within my rights to, just because it was very negligent of what he did and how heavy of an impact this is going to have on my life in so many different ways. But at the end of the day, I don't think that suing someone is I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me. And it just doesn't sit right with me intrinsically. But then as I thought about it even more, it just made even less sense to me to do that. Like, don't get me wrong, if you say got lung cancer from negligent work, right, and some fucking, I don't know, like there's a chemical leak at your job and you've got lung cancer and you're going to die in 6 months, and it's a giant billion-dollar company and you have to sue them so that your children can go through school after you die, that's a very different situation. But in this context where this guy fucked up, but he's a human, he made a mistake, I don't think he was doing it with malice, it just doesn't, I just can't sue someone for this. It just doesn't make sense. And, everyone telling me this, it's, I just kind of look at it, and people get angry at me when I say I won't sue, because they're like, "What do you mean? Like, don't you love yourself enough to sue this guy? You should have more respect for yourself." And it's more that it's the fact that I have respect for myself that I don't want to sue this guy, and it's part of being a man, where it's like, you just fucking move on. Like, shit happens, and then you move on. And I have a lot of anxiety about the surgery, for example, the idea of, potentially paralyzing my arm, or, a brachial artery cut, or the anesthesia going wrong, or whatever, or getting infections after the fact, and, the surgery itself, and then the recovery process. I have, a bunch of stress about that. But the way it's given me perspective on fear and anticipation of bad things. And lately, the prospect of going to surgery, there's so many reasons that it fucks with my head, and some of them I can't even go into. It's very personal. But I've been able to kind of meditate on my anxiety and go, well, and this is very cliche, but it's the idea that it's not happening right now. This thing you're worrying about happening is not happening right now, so why worry about it? And for the longest time, I'd hear that and I'd say, oh, well, that's all good and well, but I still can't stop myself from worrying. But in this time around, with this stress of surgery, I've done a very good job of just simply going, no, it really isn't happening right now. So what's the point fucking stressing about it right now when I could just be a happy-go-lucky person, you know, sort of a hero of sorts to the people around you, like a an example of stoicism and joy, right? And it's, you know, like people have been weirded out by my positivity through this time. People are like, how the fuck, like even people in the comments when I said my bicep tore, one guy, a few people was just saying, you know, my self-control is unnatural. And I mean, I'm flattered, but also it's just, I don't know. It's that I pathologically silver line everything. This bicep tear fucking sucks, but there is a silver lining in this, and that's, you know, taking care of my health more. I've been doing a lot of rehabbing, but also just perspectives on bad times as a man. Things happen, and this has been a test for me, and I think I'm doing well. I think this test is, I'm going through this test with, you know, straight A's, because so far I've actually taken some joy in this test. It sounds fucking morbid, I know, but where am I going with this? Basically, in this time I've been thinking about the man I want to be, and I want to be, you know, I was thinking about, you know, okay, for example, I grew up with three sisters, so I was very effeminate in the mind until probably you know, sort of 23 years old. I started getting more masculine, and that was due to a friend and different influences, and my brain started shifting and getting out of this like mother's boy and woman environment that kind of fucked my brain a little bit. And it wasn't until recently did I become much more of a man. And so now I've totally forgot what the fuck I am. So where was I? Yes. So until recently, I switched out of this sort of feminine brain that I'd been influenced by basically a somewhat absent father, or a father was there, but that wasn't quite there kind of thing. Like he's there, but not there present. And then, you know, a mother and a bunch of sisters, and that's not good for a young boy's brain. It makes them very effeminate, and I've been able to get out of that recently. I've you know, taken the hero's journey and become a man, and especially now I can fully fledged say that I'm a man with full confidence. It's very easy for me to say that now, and for this experience, it's only solidified that more. You know, the idea of suing this guy, I saw this as very feminine. I saw the idea of resentment and gossiping about this guy and telling people what a bad guy he is, all this shit that I want to do. There's all these feelings, key point here, that I want to just let out and be like, fuck this guy, blah, 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 and fucking, yeah. I even wanted to cry at one point based off all this shit. But it's fucking useless. That's not what being a man about. I think it's so much better to just forgive, and then, you know, in 6 months from now, go into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu again, face my fears, do it again, take it safer this time, take a more logical approach, be a fucking man about it. Basically, is the short answer to this ramble is this whole time I've been fighting against feminine, you know, energy. I suppose is. Anxiety about the hospital, anxiety about the rehab process, anxiety about death, anxiety about, you know, vulnerability now that I've only got one arm, all this shit. But I've been very successful at just staving these off and fighting them off and staying in the man brain. And that, you know, for 5 years ago, this would have been a very different situation. I would have been so effeminate about this situation. And yeah, it's just given me a lot of perspective on the man I want to be. And I don't want to go into details on that because I think certain things you should keep to your own heart. But there is a certain picture of the man I want to be. And this is kind of the part two of this, which is part of getting out of that effeminate brain for me was, you know, social media influences. A big one was Elliot Hulse. I'm ashamed to say, but even Andrew Tate at one point was very much a prominent figure in getting me out of a feminine brain. Now I see Andrew Tate and I go, fuck me, like, what a false messiah. But by all means, he did some good work for me at least, and many other guys. But also, false messiah. But a lot of these kind of guys, Elliot Hulse, Andrew Tate, unfortunately, even Joe Rogan when I was a teenager. Joe Rogan, not so much nowadays, but just, different male figures that I didn't really necessarily have growing up that were able to get me out, or even my best mate was another one. But what happens is you become a facsimile of these men. You don't become your own man. And it's kind of like these guys are like motivation. They're kindling for you then to go on with drive and become your own man. So you pick up a few traits of these people along the way. You might even pick up a lot of their traits. Hence why I'm not a huge fan of Andrew Tate, for example, because a lot of these traits are garbage. Elliot Hulse, for example, is a great example of one that you could take a hell of a lot of traits from, and you'd probably be way better person. If you just straight up copied him, you'd be a better person. But it's not authentic. And the idea is to take an amalgamation of all these great men around you. Read men of old, the Alexander the Greats, the Mike Tysons. Again, Mike Tyson's not the great example because he's a rapist. But you understand what I'm saying. You take good out of flawed or otherwise not so flawed men, but then you have to, I guess, envision a version of yourself though. The best man version of yourself, or woman, if you any ladies listening, but in this case, man. Think of the highest version of yourself, which is, cliche, be the strongest version, the best version of yourself. But think of it as the best man that you can be, under the context of man, not the best person you can be, because that's very vague. I'm saying the best man you can be. And that's something now that this bicep injury's really got my eyes on, which is trying to break from things that aren't actually necessarily me. They're things that I'm trying to copy from other people, and now trying to really focus on the man that I want to be, becoming me, right? It's I probably sound very self-help guru bullshit right now, but because a lot of this stuff is what they say, but I think a lot of it is just shallow, weightless nonsense. They don't actually think these things out. But this has really snapped in my brain, especially from this bicep injury and all the fears that have come with it, and then responding in kind. And I wouldn't have been able to do this before had I not been able to develop my own man character. So that's the second part is, if you're listening, it's great especially if you're younger, if you're like 19, 20 and you're watching an Andrew Tate or an Elliot Hulse or whoever. I don't know. I don't really watch anyone anymore. That's part of the process, is then you take sort of a red pill in quotations of sorts, and then you fucking totally avoid all that shit it costs, because otherwise it's like self-help books, right? A lot of people I know, one in particular, my sister, she wouldn't mind me saying this, is she has read every self-help book under the sun, but she does just about zero self-help. Her thing is consuming the self-help rather than doing the self-help. And the same thing can go for like the red pill manosphere nonsense, where it's like dudes would just spend years at a time watching, fucking red pill male sphere nonsense, and then they don't actually do anything about it. They don't then individualize that stuff. They just become a copy. The amount of guys I've met in recent times where they're like, yeah, I'm so based, I'm so traditional and masculine and fucking whatever, and then it's like they run out of script because there's fucking nothing there. They're just quoting someone else, or like not even quoting. They're like paraphrasing someone else's nonsense, and it's like, especially the Joe Rogan ones. And I was very guilty of this when I was, way younger, like 16 to 20. I would watch a lot of Joe Rogan podcasts, and then I would just be like, everyone's fucking done this at one point with Joe Rogan podcasts. Part of why I don't watch them anymore is you watch one podcast with a nutritionist, or I'd say a carnivore nutritionist, and then you listen to it for 3 hours. You don't really absorb much of it. You just get some key highlights, and then you go tell everyone that carnivore is the best diet in the world, not taking into consideration any of the fucking science behind it. You don't know a fucking thing about it, but now all of a sudden you're an expert, and you're just paraphrasing something that someone else said. And if anyone with any real knowledge was to question you on it, you'd be like, well, Dr. Mike Baker said it this, like, you know what I mean? Like, someone will say, okay, well, what, like in the case of carnivore, someone will say carnivore is the best diet, and then you say, All right. Well, what about the massive amount of cortisol that you have to produce to go through protein glycogenesis? And then people were just like they didn't know what any of that means. They're just paraphrasing, and then they'll just fucking freeze. And same thing goes with just being a man. Like guys will have a copy and paste version of what masculinity is imprinted on them by some father figure, basically, a YouTube father figure. And I've been guilty of this myself, and I probably am still guilty of this subconsciously. But yeah, you have to. That's part of experience, right? This is an experience, this bicep tear, and it's then tested these principles that I've been thinking about, and so far the principles have stayed true. I have actually been true to my principles, unlike what I might have been like previously. I might have been like, yeah, I'm fucking like I'm a man, blah blah blah, blah, like when I was 20. And then if I tore my bicep, I'd have a fucking mental breakdown, and the idea of surgery would freak me out, and I wouldn't even be able to do the surgery because I'd be so fucking terrified. Like, I can just see that being a reality. So, yeah, understand that you need that initial fire. You need the guy that's gonna kick you in the ass, the guy that tells you need to buy a fucking Bugatti and do push-ups and fucking all that nonsense, and that will get you kindled. But then after that, it has to be something higher, and that's kind of where spirituality or religion comes in. But that's not really where I'm going to go. Although that has been very powerful for me personally, is having something higher than. I think the ultimate man archetype, and don't take this the wrong way, but the ultimate man archetype is Jesus. And it's going to sound very childish, but the closest, the easiest way to put this into like a palatable way, the easiest way to palatalize this would be, I watched Lord of the Rings recently, and Aragorn in that movie obviously is an actor, and the person Viggo Mortensen's probably nothing like Aragorn, but the character itself is very Christ consciousness. It's not, and I don't mean a Christian way, but in like a just a very like graceful masculinity, like kind but stern, and just very giving, and no bad intentions, just gracefulness. I don't know where am I going with this? Anyway, basically, part of what has been so good for me about Christianity, and Christianity I say loosely because I'm not like I'm not like a Christian, I suppose. I don't interpret it like straight up like the average Christian does. There's plenty in the Bible where I'm like, I'm not sure about this, but point being is Jesus is a perfect example to emulate your masculinity off. Whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jew, well, if you're Jewish, you're probably not a huge fan of Jesus. But point being is, Jesus is personally a very good example of masculinity for me. He's just such a good example of it. And for you, it might be Aragorn. Go watch Lord of the Rings. It's a great example of masculinity in a new age way, if you want to watch it through media rather than reading a 2,000-year-old book. But there's more than just the YouTube guys. And I'd say a lot of the ones in the books, or even maybe movie characters. But then even then, I mean, the movie characters, it's the perfect example of this. You have the guys who are like, I'm Patrick Bateman, like the Sigma males, or the fucking who else is there? I don't know, like the guy from Drive, like the Ryan Gosling characters. It's like, I'm him. That nonsense. That is the perfect example of what I'm saying. You need to be the opposite of. This is like, I'm straight up idol worshipping a character that's not even real and cannot be real because it's a fucking falsified piece of fiction. I'd say Lord of the Rings is probably the best one because Aragorn is based in like pagan archetypes and like an actual genius work of books, whereas like Patrick Bateman's like, it's just a no-brainer. But anyway, I digress so hard. Point being is you can't like idol worship these guys. You can't just, even Aragorn, for example, you could probably copy Aragorn from Lord of the Rings and become an exceptional man just by trying to be Aragorn, because Aragorn's fucking awesome. He's just such a kind, graceful, stoic, masculine beast of a character, right? But it wouldn't be authentic, and it would fall flat when you were tested. When you're tested one day, it won't be you, it will be Aragorn, and Aragorn isn't actually you. So when you're truly tested, it will just fucking fall apart. And that's kind of, this bicep test. The bicep tear has been a test of how authentic my personality is, and so far I'm quite happy with the results. It's been able to show me that I'm doing good work within myself. And you should always be tested, because that's the only way you'll know if what you're doing is fucking working. Anyway, this has been a very long rant. It's very well could be very boring for many of you, but I thought this is something I wanted to talk about. This has been on my heart, right? So, authentic masculinity, essentially, or becoming the man you want to be. You have to be you. Have an amalgamation of different people. Here's my back. Back's looking all right. Hopefully it doesn't get too much smaller. And then I did the front pose, which I've never been good at, and it looks even worse for my fucking bicep all torn up like that. Oh my god, that arm's looking like shit. Alright, anyway, that's enough for that rant. See you guys for more Piss and Vinegar. Bye-bye.